I'm delighted to have this opportunity to thank the people of Flanders, and especially Ypres and members of the Last Post Association, for continuing to honour the sacrifice of our fallen.
Duke of Kent finally confesses, Catherine must inherit my crown jewels, not Camilla. Somewhere inside Kensington Palace sits a jewellery collection that survived the Russian Revolution, outlasted an empire, and passed through the hands of some of the most extraordinary women in modern history. Now, the man who controls that collection has reportedly made a decision that Queen Camilla never saw coming. The Duke of Kent, one of the most senior and most trusted members of the Windsor family, has reportedly made it known exactly who he wants to inherit his legendary family jewels. And his answer has left the palace with no idea how to respond. Before we get into the jewels, before we talk about the funeral, before we even begin to unpack the palace politics, you need to understand one man, because without him, this entire story makes no sense at all. His name is Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent. He is 90 years old. He has served the British Crown without a single public scandal for over 6 decades. He is a Field Marshal, the highest rank in the British Army. He has been Grand Master of the Freemasons since 1967, nearly 58 continuous years of quiet institutional power that most people do not even know exists. For 52 years from 1969 to 2021, he was the face of Wimbledon, the man who walked onto centre court every July and handed trophies to Roger Federer, Serena Williams, Novak Djokovic and dozens of others. He made over 350 trophy presentations. He barely missed a single year. But the detail that changes everything about how you understand his place in this story is this. And Edward George is the last surviving person alive during King George V's reign. He is the first cousin of the late Queen Elizabeth II. In June 2022, at the Platinum Jubilee, a photograph went around the world that very few people truly understood. The Queen was 96 years old. She stepped onto the Buckingham Palace balcony for the first time without Prince Philip. There was one person standing beside her. It was Edward, the Duke of Kent. His wife, Catherine, was something even rarer than the Duke himself. She was born a commoner, the first non-titled person to marry a royal duke in over a century. The Duke's mother, Princess Marina, refused the match twice before she finally gave her blessing. Catherine had already travelled to Canada alone, taken a Greyhound bus across an entire continent, and waited for the man she loved to fight for her. He did. They married on June 8, 1961 at York Minster, in the first royal wedding held there in 633 years, watched on television by 8 million people. What Catherine did with her decades as a duchess was unlike anything the royal family had produced before or since. She drove a 400-mile round trip from London every week to teach music at a primary school in Hull. For years, nobody knew who she was. Not the parents, not the children, not anyone except the head tier. She introduced herself simply as Mrs. Kent. She trained as a Samaritan and took crisis phone calls in complete anonymity. She volunteered at a homeless shelter. She co-founded Future Talent in 2004 to support musically gifted children from poor families. In 1977, she gave birth 9 months into her pregnancy. The baby was stillborn. She spoke publicly about the depression that followed decades before any other royal ever dared to acknowledge mental illness. In 1994, she made the most explosive personal decision any senior royal had made in 300 years. She converted to Catholicism, becoming the first senior member of the British royal family to publicly do so since the Act of Settlement of 1701. When asked why, she said simply, "It had a great deal to do with people I met, mainly a man we all call the boss, the Cardinal. I was struck by his humility above all else." On the evening of September 4th, 2025, Catherine, Duchess of Kent, died peacefully at Kensington Palace, aged 92, surrounded by her family. And what happened in the 12 days that followed would expose tensions inside the royal family that the palace had spent years desperately hoping the public would never notice. Now, to understand why anyone inside the royal family would fight over the Kent jewellery collection, you first need to understand what it actually is. These are not beautiful accessories. They are a living archive of the most turbulent centuries in European history, and every stone in that collection survived things that entire empires did not. The story begins in Russia. In a palace in St. Petersburg, a woman named Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna possessed the finest private jewellery collection in the entire Russian Empire outside the Tsarina herself. When the revolution came in 1917, her son Boris and a British diplomat named Bertie Stopford disguised themselves as workmen and broke into the Vladimir Palace. They smuggled the jewels out in Gladstone bags and deposited them in a London safety deposit box. 224 pieces recorded by Gerards in January 1920 escaped the revolution entirely. Grand Duchess Vladimir's only daughter was Elena Vladimirna of Russia. Elena's daughter was Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark. That single bloodline is how Romanov imperial jewels became Kent family jewels. Marina brought them across Europe when she married into the Windsor family in 1934. Marina was already the most stylish royal in Europe before she arrived in Britain. London shops sold Marina hats, copying her signature styles within weeks of her engagement being announced. A colour, a specific shade of turquoise, was named Marina Blue in her honour. The couturier Molyneux called her the greatest influence on fashion since Empress Eugénie. Queen Mary, who understood the weight of royal jewellery better than almost anyone in the 20th century, made sure Marina received the most historically significant pieces in the family's possession as wedding gifts. The most important was the Cambridge sapphire Peru, a complete suite of sapphires and diamonds that had been created for Princess Augusta of Cambridge in the 1830s and had passed through 7 decades of royal women before reaching Marina's hands. When Marina died in 1968, the Duke was forced to sell several pieces almost immediately simply to cover death duties. The Cambridge sapphire tiara was sold at Sabes in 1993. A Romanov diamond bow brooch that had travelled from the Vladimir Palace during the Revolution was eventually resold at Christie's in 2012 for $842,500, 4 times its estimate. The diamond garundel earrings that once hung in a palace that no longer existed are now reportedly owned by Kim Kardashian. What remained was still significant. The Kent pearl fringe tiara, believed to incorporate elements of a Vladimir piece, was publicly displayed as recently as 2022. What survived carries tens of millions of pounds in monetary value and something entirely beyond price, an unbroken material connection to a world the revolution tried to erase. Whoever inherits what remains does not simply gain jewellery. They accept the responsibility of carrying 4 generations of extraordinary women forward into the future. And according to the whispers currently moving through royal circles, the Duke of Kent has decided exactly who deserves to carry that weight. The name he reportedly chose was not the one Buckingham Palace would have selected. And the reason he chose it reaches back not just through the Kent collection, but through the entire unspoken battle over who the monarchy belongs to next. In the weeks following the Duchess of Kent's death in September 2025, the Duke was grieving the loss of a 64-year marriage and reportedly reflecting on legacy in a way he had never done before in his long public life. And sources close to the Kent family began sharing something that the palace immediately declined to address. The Duke had expressed a clear and deeply personal wish about the remaining collection. He wanted those pieces, the historic sapphires on the Romanov-descended diamonds, the tiaras that had survived the destruction of an empire, to go to Catherine, Princess of Wales, not to Queen Camilla, to Catherine. The Duke of Kent is not a peripheral figure in this calculation. He is the last surviving first cousin of Queen Elizabeth II. He has served the crown for over 6 decades without a single controversy. For a man who has spent his entire life believing that a Windsor does not complain and does not explain, to express a clear personal wish about something as charged as his family's jewellery is not a small gesture. It is, for people who know him well, an earthquake. And the woman he reportedly named was someone the British public had watched fight her way back from something far more terrifying than palace politics. In March 2024, Arthurine sat on a bench at Windsor and recorded a video message to the world. She said she had been diagnosed with cancer. She described the surgery, the shock of the discovery, the chemotherapy that followed. She did not disclose the type. She said simply, "I am well and getting stronger every day." She appeared at Trooping the Colour in June 2024. She appeared at Wimbledon in July, where she received a standing ovation that moved people who had never met her to tears. In January 2025, she announced remission. At a hospital visit in July 2025, she said with quiet honesty, "You put on a brave face, stoicism through treatment." But actually, the phase afterwards is really difficult. 6 words that made her more real to the British public than 20 years of official communications ever had. It was in this context of a woman who had faced something that could have taken her from the world and had walked back into the light anyway that the Duke's alleged wish arrived. Not as palace gossip, as a statement about what the future of the monarchy is supposed to look like. But the palace was not about to allow an informal wish to disrupt an established order without a fight, because that established order had its own very powerful advocate, and she was already wearing the jewels. The hierarchy that governs those decisions is, according to royal expert Katie Nichols, simple and unyielding. The Queen Consort receives first choice. After that comes the Princess of Wales. After that comes everyone else. The wife of the reigning king gets the tools she needs to fulfill her constitutional role. The future queen waits her turn. Camilla has been active and deliberate within that hierarchy. At a 2023 Mansion House reception, she wore the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, one of Queen Elizabeth's absolute favourites. At a 2024 state banquet, she surfaced the Queen Alexandra Kokosnik tiara, unseen publicly since 2015. At the November 2025 diplomatic reception, she appeared in the Breville Emerald Kokosnik, previously worn by Princess Eugénie at her 2018 wedding. The court jeweller named the Kokosnik appearance the single biggest royal jewellery moment of 2024. Camilla is not passive in this hierarchy. She is actively and visibly claiming her place. And yet, something entirely separate has been unfolding in parallel. While Camilla occupies the present, the palace has been quietly and unmistakably building Catherine into the future. The pieces Catherine has been given to wear over the past 2 years tell a story that goes far beyond protocol. They tell a story about intention. Catherine's signature piece is the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara made in 1913 for Queen Mary and famously worn by Princess Diana throughout the 1980s. After Diana's death, it disappeared from public view for 18 years. Then in December 2015, Catherine wore it for the first time, and it has become her most photographed royal piece ever since. Queen Mary herself held both the titles Duchess of Cambridge and Princess of Wales during her life. Those are the two titles Catherine has held. The symbolism is not coincidental, but the most significant single moment came in December 2025. At a state banquet at Windsor Castle, Catherine appeared wearing Queen Victoria's Oriental Surlet tiara and 2,600 diamonds and rubies, designed by Prince Albert in 1853 and historically reserved by Queen Victoria's own stipulation exclusively for queens. Catherine became the first princess, the first non-queen ever to wear it publicly in its 172-year history. This is the real tension that the palace will never openly acknowledge. It is not a feud between two women, it is a collision between two timelines. Camilla holds the present. Catherine is being constructed as the permanent future. Both tracks are real and both are being managed simultaneously by a king who understands he is bridging them. And then a funeral arrived that neither track had prepared for. A funeral that became the most historically significant royal event in 500 years. And a seat inside that cathedral that stayed empty in a way the palace could not explain away. On September 16, 2025, King Charles III sat inside Westminster Cathedral for a Catholic Requiem Mass and became the first reigning British monarch to formally attend a Catholic service on UK soil since the Reformation ended, Britain's relationship with Rome nearly 500 years ago. As Supreme Governor of the Church of England, who had sworn at his own coronation to uphold the Protestant religion, he sat in a Catholic cathedral as an act of personal love for a woman who had converted 31 years earlier and spent the decades that followed serving her faith and her community in equal and total anonymity. The king was visibly emotional throughout the service. Prince William sat beside him where Catherine was photographed quietly comforting the king at several points, a gesture that photographers caught and distributed around the world within the hour. Princess Anne attended, Prince Andrew attended in one of his rare recent public appearances. The Duke of Kent himself was there at 89, walking with a stick, his daughter, Lady Helen Taylor, beside him wearing her late mother's own diamond brooch and sapphire engagement ring as a private tribute. Every senior member of the Windsor family was inside that cathedral, and Queen Camilla was not there. Camilla had travelled from Scotland that morning and would resume her full schedule the very next day to receive Donald Trump at the opening of his state visit. She was absent from a moment historians were already calling unprecedented and present for a presidential welcome 24 hours later. Now the public was asking a question out loud that the palace had spent 3 years hoping would stay unspoken. And the answer to that question lived not in any official statement but in the legal architecture governing who actually controls what happens to the jewels next. Here is something that almost nobody outside constitutional law circles fully understands about royal jewellery. The crown jewels, the imperial state crown, the orb, the sceptre, those belong to the nation. King James established that in 6006 they pass automatically with the monarchy itself and cannot be individually inherited, gifted or sold. The personal collection that Queen Elizabeth built over 70 years is different. It passed to Charles as part of her private estate. Entirely tax-free under the 1993 Memorandum of Understanding on Royal Taxation, which exempts sovereign to sovereign inheritance. Charles controls those roughly 400 pieces and loans them according to the hierarchy Nicol described. The Kent family jewellery is a completely different legal category from both of those. Those pieces are private property. They descended to the Duke of Kent from Princess Marina as personal possessions inherited through the Romanov-descended Vladimir line. They are his. The king has no automatic legal claim to any of them. The Duke can dispose of his own property however he chooses, through his will, through private gifts during his lifetime, through any mechanism available to any private citizen. This is the legal reality that makes the Duke's alleged declaration so significant. But if he wants his remaining jewellery to go to Catherine, he can make that happen. Legally, nobody could stop him. The question is purely whether those around him would honour the wish or whether institutional pressure would quietly redirect things after the fact. Royal wills are almost always sealed. The practice dates to 1911. In 2021, Sir Andrew McFarland, President of the Family Division, confirmed that he personally holds more than 30 sealed envelopes in his private safe, each containing the will of a deceased royal family member. They are sealed for 90 years. Whatever the Duke's will eventually contains, the public will almost certainly never read it. In December 2025, Catherine walked into a state banquet wearing a tiara that Queen Victoria had stipulated in her own will should only ever be worn by queens on 600 diamonds and rubies designed by Prince Albert in 1853. Catherine wore it as a princess, not a queen, becoming the first person in 172 years ever to do so. The jewel historians who saw the photographs understood immediately. This was not a fashion choice. It was a declaration from the institution itself. The British Social Attitude Survey, published in September 2025, found that only 51% of British people described the monarchy as very or quite important, the lowest figure since records began. Among people aged 16 to 24, 67% said they would prefer an elected head of state. The numbers that had held the institution together for generations were finally moving in the wrong direction, and the people inside the palace knew it. In that context, Catherine's recovery from cancer was not simply a personal story. It was an institutional event. The woman on whom the monarchy's long-term survival arguably depends most had faced something that could have taken her away entirely, and she came back, not loudly, not with grand speeches or orchestrated moments, steadily, visibly, and with a refusal to give the watching world any reason to stop believing in her. At a hospital visit in July 2025, she said, "You put on a brave face, stoicism through treatment, but actually the phase afterwards is really difficult." Those words did something no official communication strategy could engineer. They made her undeniably real, and that is the one quality the monarchy needs more desperately than any jewel in any collection. Camilla's story is genuinely remarkable in its own right. In the late 1990s, 2/3 of the British public opposed Charles becoming king if it meant Camilla becoming queen. The rehabilitation that followed was one of the most sustained image management operations in modern royal history. Queen Elizabeth's February 2022 statement, expressing her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort, was the moment that sealed the transformation. By October 2025, YouGov recorded Camilla at 45% positive against Catherine's 73% positive. She had earned her place, nobody reasonable disputes that, but royal history takes a longer view than any individual reign. The institution does not ask who deserves these pieces most. It asks whose hands will carry them forward in a way that makes the next generation believe the monarchy still has something to offer them. And on every available measure, from polling numbers to public moments to the extraordinary symbolic weight of the tiaras being placed on her head, the institution is already answering that question. Whether his declaration is honoured or quietly redirected inside the palace walls, what it reveals is something the public already feels in every photograph, every standing ovation, every careful placement of a historically significant tiara on one specific woman's head. The monarchy has made its calculation about the future. The Duke of Kent has reportedly made his. And the jewels, still in their cases, still waiting, are the most honest statement either of them can offer about what comes next. The palace has not spoken. The jewels have not moved. The Duke of Kent is still alive, still quiet, still watching, but the answer has already been given. It has been given in diamonds and in silence and in an empty seat inside a cathedral that 500 years of British history said could never hold a king had a Catholic mass. Every institution eventually tells the truth about itself. The British monarchy is telling its truth right now. And the truth has a name. We want to hear from you. Do you believe the Kent jewels belong with Catherine? Or does Camilla's role as queen make her the rightful heir to this extraordinary collection? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over, and your opinion genuinely matters.